Hey everyone, Enrique here. Welcome to another review.
It's X-Men time again. Welcome back, and it's good to see there are a lot of people still watching these videos. And once again we are going to review another episode of the second season of X-Men 97. This time we're taking a look at episode 6, which is called Danger.exe. It's a reference to what they call a file called Windows.exe, but that's not the focus here. The focus of this episode is seeing how the world is now progressing now that the X-Men are no longer able to do their duties in the United States. You also get more interesting stories for Polaris, Xavier, and more importantly, as they face a new enemy called Danger. So, what is going on in this episode? Let's take a look. The episode pretty much centers around how Xavier is trying to move on or trying to cope with the tragedy of the death of Magneto, repeating the scenario in the Danger Room over and over again. Meanwhile, the AI of the Danger Room is starting to analyze and evolve from the program, making it a little bit more dangerous and evolving to dangerous levels to complete the program that Xavier installed. All the while, we see Polaris being kicked out of X Factor and joining in with the X-Men as she's trying to figure out what to do. On top of that, a lot of people are talking about how she might carry the legacy of Magneto and how she can be the next one, especially considering their family lineage. And this is turning into a whole entire therapy session, or to say the least, or basically an entire battle as now the Danger Room evolved into a new character called Danger, and now it's doing a lot of damage to our heroes, and it's up to them as well as Polaris to figure out how to stop Danger. So this episode it revolves around two characters. I like that we still progressing the story. We see now that the X-Men are in a different point that we saw them before, including in new students, but also realizing that they have to evolve with the times as well as with the dangers that are awaiting for them in the future. And it's good to see that Polaris is once again joining the group. I'm gonna get to that in a moment, but let's now center around the Danger Room evolve. So it's important to mention that the Danger Room in the comics did become sentient and become the X-Men's newest enemy called Danger. She became another killer robot similar to the Sentinels, in which she, in the stories in the comic books, she was trapped by Xavier all those years ago and then turned into the Danger Room so the X-Men could go there and train. But then she eventually found a way to escape and then become something else, become another enemy for the X-Men to fight, and that's something they had to do to stop here. Here, the backstory for Danger is a little bit more different. With Xavier repeating the scenario of the death of Magneto at the hands of Apocalypse, the Danger Room starts to analyze the scenario. Xavier over and over again starts to repeat it and repeat it in order to find like a solution or a scenario in which he would have stopped Apocalypse. This catches the attention of the AI inside Danger Room, in which she realizes that in order for the X-Men to become stronger is by making the danger even more real and a lot more menacing. And that is something how that's how we got Danger in this episode. She's not trying to kill the X-Men. Okay, she is, but in an effort to make the X-Men stronger, she's starting to attacking them at different points, attacking Xavier, Cyclops, Jean, and Beast in Genosha, as well as attacking Polaris and Bishop, who are in the institution. So yeah, there's a different backstory for Danger. She's not necessarily evil, even though she starts to quip and to make snarky comments almost similar to our heroes. But she's just looking for the strongest to beat her in a combat, which is far more interesting. I mean, it's pretty much trying to not repeat what we saw before in season one, which were killer robots and how technology somehow becomes evil and all that. Here, it's a little bit more different. They are making Danger, instead of being another villain of the week, she becomes like an evolving robotic, artificial intelligence looking to make the X-Men stronger, even though she has to resort to dangerous tactics. So that's important to mention. Let's divert into that into talking about Polaris, the daughter of Magneto. So Magneto, we all know that he is with almost every woman. I know Magda, which was the woman who gave birth to Quicksilver and Wanda Maximoff, the Scarlet Witch. I also know about Rogue and romance with Magneto, but that ended up right on its tracks. But in here we have another child from a woman, Mrs. Dane, if I'm not mistaken. Mrs. Dane had a romance with Magneto in which they gave birth to Polaris. Polaris is called Lorna Dane. Now, if you only exposure to her are just the show The Gifted or maybe Wolverine in the X-Men, you know that she, like Magneto, can manipulate magnetic energy and field. But unlike, like Magneto, she doesn't have any evil, schemes or doesn't act the same way as her father does. In fact, the entire episode revolves around how she doesn't want to be like Magneto and wants to be better, not to be the second coming, if you will. So it's important to also mention this is not the first time we see Lorna in this universe and in this story. If you go back once again to X-Men, the animated series from the 90s, you know that Lorna in canon was a member of the original X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Jean, Beast, Angel, and Iceman. The reason she left is, if you watch the original show, was to be with Bobby Drake, aka Iceman. Bobby got tired of fighting the fight for the mutants. He wanted a normal life. He had a very bitter relationship between him and Xavier. Lorna, because she was dating Bobby at the time, went with him. They fell in love. They tried to create a new life, but Lorna felt like she needed to do something and Bobby just didn't want to. That's what led her to leave Bobby, but not going back to the X-Men. Instead, she decided to be with this new team called X Factor, in which in the show she fell in love with Havoc, and she decided to be a part of X Factor ever since then, alongside Wolfsbane, Strong Guy, Multiple Men, and of course Forge, who was another person that we all know he left the X Factor to be with the X-Men and with Storm. Now here Polaris is almost losing control. She started to be more aggressive when she has to, fight the criminals, in this case, mutant and human purifiers led by William Stryker, in which she started to lose control. She wanted to kill those men who wanted to get rid of mutants, and that led to, in this case, be kicked out by Valerie Cooper from X Factor. Valerie decided to fire Polaris from her job, and this causes a bridge between her and Havoc. Now, Havoc, I already mentioned before, being voiced by Teddy Sears, and now we see him just allowing Lorna to leave. He doesn't want to, and she seems that a little bit different. I mean, let's be honest, Lorna always wanted to be something on her own, not always be tied to one thing. But it's amazing that she fell in love with Havoc because she fell in love with the man who wanted to defend mutant kind, and now he's just another lapdog for the government, and that is pretty sad for Havoc. But hey, she decides what she wants in her life. So, going back to her original home, she doesn't know what to do. And seeing Xavier lost as well causes Lorna to realize that maybe it's time to be back home, to be once again part of the X-Men, although doesn't know how, without the stigma of having her father and her leg and his legacy above her shoulders. So that causes a lot of internal struggle for Lorna as well. And speaking of internal struggle, we now see that the story arc also focuses on Xavier and his trauma. I mean, losing his best friend to Apocalypse is one thing, but to repeat this scenario over and over again, not knowing what's the best thing to do, not knowing what is the best direction he could take after everything that has been happening, it's a lot for Xavier. So it's important to mention. The show establishes that the X-Men are no longer able to do their duties in North America. They're not able to use their powers or to be X-Men in the country of North America. What does this mean for the Xavier Institution? Well, thankfully, Xavier decides to take this opportunity to create the school that he always wanted for more young mutant children who we saw in episode 2 of second season. The mutants that Jubilee saved from the imprisonment that the government and X Factor had for them are now in Xavier's school. All the mutants that we saw from Generation X and all these other comic books are now part of Xavier's institution, with Stormby the headmistress. Unfortunately for Charles, he cannot be there for long, and this makes him question what is the best course of action. What can he do in order for him to make himself or make things better and trying to continue the fight that he started all those years ago? And that is the focus. This is making Xavier realize what is the best course of action. And in many respects, it also foreshadows some of the moments that we're going to see in Xavier in the near future. There are a lot of people who are going to say what it is, but I'm not going to say so if you don't know Xavier's history or you don't know what is about to happen. And plus, I wanted to leave it as a surprise. I want to say it surprisingly as much as possible. So it's important for me to keep it a secret. But let's just rest assured that Xavier's entire story arc and trauma is going to continue. Even though he managed to figure things now, they're going to get even more complicated in the future. And not just in this season, I guarantee you that. But it's good to see that Xavier is starting to show a little bit of aggressiveness and also doubt and confusion, because that is the character journey that he's about to go through this show, and he's gonna have to realize what's the best course of action, which leads us to what he decides to do in the wake of fighting Danger and realizing what he could do in the island of Genosha. He decides to create X-Corp. Now, X-Corp in the comics becomes an important part in mutant history, as it becomes another extension of the X-Men, but now to be an embassy for the mutant race in order to go there. It becomes another corporation that this time Xavier decides to create. Or in the comics, there are all different people who do that. But in this show, Xavier decides to create X-Corp to not only create a loophole between him and the United States government, but also to give another sanctuary to the mutant race and be able to evolve the idea of the X-Men. And it makes sense that it does it in Genosha to show that even though in the face of tragedy things happen in a place, that doesn't mean that things cannot be rebuilt. And that is the message that they're trying to come across with this announcement. Now there are new installations for the X-Men, but now they are requesting X Corp. And the members, of course, are Cyclops, Jean, Beast, Rogue, Nightcrawler, Bishop, and Polaris. They're gonna continue the fight, but as a different team, but still in the same X-Men family. Just things are about to be different. And it makes sense that now that they created X Corp, that now they're done in different suits. And that's something that we're about to touch upon in a minute. But yeah, this also creates a conflict with X Factor since they don't want to approve the actions of X Corp since they are still in the bounds of the government. But yeah, there's nothing they can do. X Corp is now giving birth, and it makes sense that now it's in Genosha, allowing the X-Men to continue their work of defending people and mutant rights. Now let's talk about what I alluded before. So the suits, in Xavier's institution, and the mutants arriving there, it pretty much is a combination and an amalgamation of different stories from the X-Men. For example, in this case, the suits and X Corp are all references to Grant Morrison's run writing the X-Men comics. As a matter of fact, the X-Men comics that Grant Morrison wrote were some of the most successful runs that the X-Men had in years. This was a new way to restart the series and tell all new different stories with a different set of teams. We still have the original members from the comics, Cyclops, Jean, and Beast, as well as Xavier. But now this is a different composition of the team. Now that they are having Rogue, Bishop, Polaris, and Nightcrawler. In the original one, it was the three that I mentioned and Xavier, but also Emma Frost and Wolverine. And this created a little bit of a conflict with all the characters, but it showed that the X-Men have evolved from the original run and they're continuing the stories in brand new different ways. As a matter of fact, you know the whole Wild Sentinel that attacked Genosha and killed a lot of the mutant population there? That was taken from Grant Morrison's run in the X-Men comics. But it's not just his run that is referenced here, it's also Josh Whedon's run that is also put into this episode. Now, I'm not gonna go into a rant or praise of Joss Whedon. We all know that he had made mistakes. I don't care in the slightest about him anymore. So because he has created so much damage that we just don't want to deal with him anymore. But for once, let's just acknowledge that his work as a director and writer is some of the best of all time. And he was the one person who wrote the X-Men comics in the early 2000s after the Grant Morrison run. And here we see the references from introducing Danger, but also giving Xavier's institution the home for a lot of young mutants who are still learning to control their powers. So yeah, this is definitely great. The combination of the two most successful eras that the X-Men had in years, and it's good that they're keeping the evolution of the stories and characters while paying respect to the source material. I really enjoy that. And finally, to conclude this assessment or to conclude this retrospective, let's take a look of what happens at the end of the show. And you all know what it is, which is the resurrection of Gambit by Apocalypse as the new horseman of death. So Apocalypse, we all know he likes to create his own set of horsemen with different types of mutants and his own set of their own set of abilities. Gambit died in the last season at the hands of the Wild Sentinel and Bastion. And now Apocalypse takes advantage of that opportunity to use his body, resuscitate a Gambit, and turn him into his new Horseman of Death, which is something that did happen in the comics, but unlike that version, it wasn't a volunteer, it wasn't a choice. It was a choice back then in the comics. It was a choice by Gambit to do so in order to regain his powers. But here, there was no choice. Apocalypse is once again trying to recreate his own version of the Horseman without Archangel anymore and War. Now he has to create his own all new Horseman. This leads me to conclude that he might revive another set of mutants, not just Gambit, as his new Horseman. Who could be War? Well, I have some ideas, but I'm gonna wait until I talk about it in the next episode, or maybe until the other episode that comes out, which is episode 8, says it all, and maybe I'll give my thoughts on that when I get to it. But yeah, now with Gambit as a new Horseman of Death, and it fits that his cards, his poker cards, are starting to change into prediction cards. You know, we see like the Lover, the Tower, and Death. All of them are now used by Gambit, as as they alluded before, the cards always tell the future, and in here, this is pretty much showing that he now manipulates those type of cards for his own game. So this is a different look of Gambit, and it's gonna be a whole new set of trouble for the X-Men. But what could it mean now that Gambit is the new Horseman of Death? We have to wait and see. As a whole, I really enjoyed this episode. Once again, we are returning back to the story, and it's good that we do. And it's good to see that Polaris and Xavier are dealing with their own traumas in their own respective ways. It's good to see that Danger is used mostly as a metaphor for Xavier and Polaris to deal with this type of drama. And yeah, it's good to see that the X-Men are involving not just in tactics of battle, but also in giving other mutants the opportunity to learn and change, which is all about the X-Men, evolution and change. We always have to evolve to be better. But what do you think about this episode? Do you enjoy it? Do you think it's mad? Do you don't like it? Or do you have any other thoughts that you want to give to the people? Well, in any case, leave it in the comment section below. And next week, I'll see you in the next episode. This time, we're going to focus a little bit more on X-Corp, but also in some acolytes of Magneto. So until then, I've been Enrique, and I'll see you next time. Peace.